Okay, I think we should slowly start. Welcome everybody. Welcome Barcelona, Bamberg, Trento, Tilburg, and also Milan, Aarhus, and Leuven. This is the fourth graduate conference. Unfortunately, last year we had to skip because of COVID, and because of COVID we are this year online, and hopefully the next meeting in a year's time will be live. I want to introduce to you the rector magnificus of Tilburg University, Wim van der Donk, who is so kind to open this conference. So please, Wim, can I give you the words?
Yes, thank you very much. Actually, it's an honor for me to be here. Just a short while, and I have a meeting with a university council, so I have even to miss the keynote of Tim, and that's a pity. You know, as scientists, academics, we always want to do this kind of work more than governing, but that's my job these days, and I'm very pleased to serve the university, because I think serving a university is a great thing to do, like you do all here in Tilburg and all the European cities that have been mentioned. It's great that we have this opportunity to meet each other in a way. Of course, it will never replace the real thing. I already said we don't want to be a Netflix university, but on the other hand, you know, digitalization saved us in a way. Imagine that we have had a computer virus with the coronavirus, it would have been a disaster. So, as we know, pandemics, also the earlier one, the pest in the Middle Ages, the cholera in the 18th century, 19th century, all these pandemics brought us something. It's the pest that brought city walls, have been learned, paved ways. But Arno Jan will know much more about it than me as an historian. Cholera brought us clean water and sewage systems. And I think that this pandemic will definitely go into history books as the pandemic that definitely witnessed the breakthrough of digitalization. I remember myself that when the terrible attacks in the Twin Towers in the United States, I had some appointments in the States the months after, and of course everything was cancelled. And we did all kind of stuff, you know, video calling and so, but it was compared with what we have now, it was, you know, child play. On the other hand, it will never replace the real thing. Of course, it's important for you, PhD students, academics, to be able to real meet. And I hope that the next interdisciplinary conference will be held in a real city with real people and real encounters. I've seen the amount of work you have to do, because what a great variety of papers that are reflecting all the PhD process and projects that you are working on. And I'm impressed. And I only want to underline the importance of the work you do, because I said digitalization technology in a way is now having a lot of attention. Also in the university landscape in the Netherlands, it might be different in Europe, but I hear the same notes from other countries, that we tend to understand societal change as technological change. And I will never relativize the importance of technology. I think it's indeed a very important driver of technology. Technology is a kind of opportunity structure that opens new things, and it's not, you know, not a naive instrumental view on technology. We as social scientists know that it's a naive idea. Technology is politics, is about power relations, is about new things that are happening and that are not, you know, a choice. Sometimes you are you know, you're seduced by the opportunities, and saying no against new opportunities sometimes more difficult than just saying yes. It's a complex social affair. And that's exactly why I'm so supportive of this kind of conferences. Although we could question the notion of interdisciplinarity and multidisciplinarity, it's the title of the conference, Tim, I saw, and I think we are entering an age that we should renew reflections on what exactly is that. Just putting different disciplines together is not, I think, interdisciplinary research. It's intriguing, but that's for later, I would say. What I would say this morning to you all is that you should be encouraged as social scientists. To say it a little bit awkward Trumpian, I said, make the social sciences great again. because we need them so much, because all these technologies, of course, are there and they are important. I do not, again, relativize that. But to really make sure that all these technological changes, these drivers, can be brought to the common good, to the pursuit of a good, just, sustainable society, we all know that behavior of individuals, behavior in social systems is perhaps more important still than the mere presence of technology. So we will need sociologists, psychologists, historians in order to be, and I'm not limitative there, to really study what's going on. And that I saw a little bit reflected in this great variety of papers you have. So it will be hard work for you all to really be seduced to understand what your colleague is doing. But that's exactly, I think, that's my final point, the charm and the endeavor in this interdisciplinarity. Because it's, for me, an invitation in a university to have the opportunity and the willingness to learn from the other. In principle, I think, even a paleontologist should be willing to learn from an historian or somebody who studies sinology, whatever. I think that creative academic work is always, well, I would say supported, initiated by the attitude of looking beyond your own discipline. That is, of course, not a message that you should not invest in a sound disciplinary basis. But the atmosphere of an academy, of a university, should exactly be this. It's universal knowledge. It's the idea that we can learn from each other. And in that spirit, I hope that you, despite the warm weather, will remember this conference with warm feelings of the opportunities you were offered to learn from each other. Lots of success these days and joy, I would say also. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Wim, for this inspiring introduction. Well, let's continue with the next part, which is the lecture by Tim Reeskens about values and opinions in the context of the pandemic. This will be the last part of the conference that will be kind of hybrid, and after this we will continue with the different sessions. So I want to give the floor now to Tim.
Thank you, Ruud, and thank you, local organizing committee, for organizing this. Thank you, Wim, for the warm words, and yeah, also warm feelings towards this conference. I think in the first place that goes to the organizing committee, and for inviting me to give this keynote speech. I think it's also my first. Hope this works. It's also my first keynote speech, so I was a little bit like, okay, brace myself, like the honor for giving this kind of lecture. But at the same time, I really love conferences, and if you go to conferences and you attend these keynote speeches, then often at the end of the day you're a bit like disappointed, because you hear like a resume of all the research that this guy or this woman in front of you has been doing for the last 10-15 years. But it's like, yeah, it's been a summary of all the insights that I already read about, nothing that novel. And yeah, so you go a bit like starstruck, looking at people. Well, at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, but what are the new insights? I really want to gather something new. And I hope with this kind of resume of research that we, and this is actually quite important, it's not only me that is part of this presentation, is actually yeah, a lion's share of the people that work at the Department of Sociology and beyond. So yeah, some people in here, they give advice on one question, like how should we actually measure trust in science? Peter Achterberg. Other people gave some comments on work in progress, like during last week's sociology day. While other people actually contributed more substantially, co-author papers and so forth. So I really hope that this presentation is like a kind of a reflection of teamwork, and that also people that have been part of the team will also read or see something novel today, hoping that in the end the presentation is also elusive enough for and funny enough as well for people like Michael Kollander. So Great. So yeah, also thank for like anonymous reviewers, not always that supportive, that have been reviewing work. Also like the NWO for supporting the study, as well as the TSB, Tilburg School of Social and Behavioral Sciences, and one of the most important players, Center Data, the people that administer the survey, for taking us part of the list panel. So what's actually the aim of today, and what's actually the main inspiration for this kind of research? It's a story that maybe some of you already heard like maybe 3 or 4 times in other presentations as well. But at the start of the pandemic, you had some of these futurists like Yuval Noah Harari, who actually claimed that this and some other people as well, who claimed that a pandemic like this, it can be like a major engine, like a driver for social change, and that we as society, we face a few kind of options, some kind of dilemmas. We might be confronted with some of these dilemmas these days as well. He, for instance, says, well, in this time of crisis, we face 2 particularly important choices. The first one is between totalitarian surveillance and citizen empowerment. The second is between nationalist isolation and global solidarity. And it's quite, I mean, he's a futurist, so we already saw it coming, but some of these choices already played out quite prominently. We have these debates about the coronavirus passport. The tracing app had something that Wim also talked about, technological innovation. So to what extent do we actually allow for these kind of intrusive measures that the government actually imposes on us? From July 1st onwards, we may travel with the QR code if you're vaccinated, or if our brain has been tickled with a PCR test. So these are like the things that we actually seem to accept from government in the end. And also the dilemma between nationalist isolation and global solidarity. That's also something that really plays out these days when you read about the global justice, global solidarity in terms of the vaccination strategy. So is it really that we want to preserve like all these vaccine first? I'm not going to be like Trump, but is it like really our country first and then the rest of the world, or which seems to be the case these days? But at the same time, you also see some leftovers. Yeah, and this is really awful as well. The AstraZeneca leftovers that are being like sent to countries that that need vaccines, but well, the first choice, the first options are the stellar vaccines like Pfizer and Moderna. Well, it seems that the Western world takes the hands on these kind of issues, on these kind of vaccines. So the tensions that Harari already explained last year, they already play out heavily, excessively in the year that followed this opinion article. I think it was in the Financial Times. But important for the inspiration of this kind of line of research is that for all these changes to take place, if really governments want to push through this totalitarian regime and contact tracing, well, there should be some support from the public as well. For having all these changes taking place, also public opinion should be supportive for all these kind of measures. And this is actually what struck me from the beginning, because we do know that to have this kind of public legitimacy, the values that people have should also follow suit, should also change a little bit. And this is why last year I wrote like an opinion article for Sociale Vraagstukken, which is like a Dutch version of the monkey cage, if we make it a bit ambitious. But it's like a blog site for social scientists where they communicate research findings. They want to launch ideas, they communicate findings that have been published in international articles. And I was like, well, yeah, all this change that the great equalizer or the engine for social change, well, it really needs to be seen to what extent this will happen. Because what we know from earlier crises, from earlier major events like the Great Recession in 2008, is that public opinion might shift a bit, but in the end, it goes back to the same old, so to speak. And so there's a great study done by Jutta Margeliet in 2000. It was published in 2013, but it was based on public opinion data on social policy preferences in the US. The question, well, to what extent do people become more in favor of redistribution when confronted with economic scarcity, so exposure to the Great Recession? And he actually diagnosed that after the Great Recession, it were particularly Republican voters who experienced economic hardship that became more in favor of redistribution. But the thing is that after they found a new job, they had income again, these Republicans, they moved back to the original anti-state position of welfare redistribution. So it seems to be the case that, yeah, even the anti-state intervention Republicans, when they were exposed to economic hardship amidst the Great Recession, they also adjusted their opinion and became actually more in favor of welfare redistribution. However, when things smoothed out, leveled out, again, they were against redistribution as in the original phase. And also, other events that have been quite detrimental for people and quite, traumatizing. Some quasi, I mean, I wouldn't call it a quasi experiment because it's really awful, but I hope that you understand what I'm saying. So like the terrorist attack in Madrid at Atocha station and the trains over there. Amidst this event, you had fieldwork going on in Spain from the Eurobarometer, and the Eurobarometer they gathered data about political trust and trust in institutions, and this research note published in political psychology, and actually shows that. I don't have the graph in there, but if you read the paper and you look for the graph, you will see that after the terrorist attacks. You do see that people give more support for these institutions, not only government, but also other institutions like press, political parties. So people rally around the incumbent institutions because they experience something really bad, and they actually demand from government to give them a way out of this whole crisis. But they also diagnosed. Because the Eurobarometer that takes place like every half a year, is that half a year later it was just the same old. So political trust was back to the original position, and it's not the case that because of this major event, governments will continuously benefit from this. It seems to be that there's like an expiration date of all these changes that take place. So that was the main like theoretical and also empirical backbone of this research stream, we asked for money from Netherlands Organization for Scientific Research, from the Tilburg School of Social and Behavioral Sciences. The question, well, can you actually support us to go into the field and collect some data to actually see to what extent is public opinion stable during the crisis, or do we see some volatility that we might basically also expect from earlier studies on different kind of contexts like the economic crisis or terrorist events, because in the end, something like a pandemic, that was not so, it's something novel for us over here. So what does the data actually look like? We had like a pretest, and I'm standing here as the Dutch representative of the European Value Study. And as some of you might know, who are familiar with European Value Study, is that there was a pretest. I mean, not a pretest. It's just like the fifth wave of data collection taking place in 2017. So in more than 40 countries, data have been collected to complete the whole longitudinal and comparative research project that was initiated in 1980. So the thing with this EVS is that it was fielded in mixed mode strategy for the Netherlands and a few other countries, which meant that part of it was face-to-face. ENO research, they approached people. Yes, that was still possible in 2017, going from door to door. And they collected information surveys from about 680 people. But the other part was administered by center data as part of the list panel. And in other countries, like in Switzerland and Finland and Germany, Denmark, they also implemented this mixed mode strategy where part was fielded face-to-face and the other part was actually fielded over the web, Kawi style, in the matrix, very interesting matrix design. But the advantage that we had is that the survey was actually implemented in the list panel. And the list panel, as I think a lot of you might know, it follows people over time. And all these respondents, they receive a questionnaire like every month. It can go about various topics, and you can buy yourself in. And this is actually quite interesting for us because some of these panelists from 2017, they're still participated in 2020 because it is a panel. It's sometimes possible that people drop out. Also something that we actually encountered with our data collection that, and I will talk about that as well later, is that people drop out from this the survey. They might be too busy doing other things, particularly now with Corona, maybe as well working and homeschooling and all these things that we were confronted with over the year. So there was some attrition, but at the same time, for tracking within change within these individuals, it's a really good strategy. It's really good to have such a panel design. With 2017 as a pretest, yes, it might look a long way, 2 years and a half, but at least there is a pretest involved. And I think that is quite important. You do see studies appear that gathered data in June or May 2020. They are important because you can indeed look comparatively at public opinion and values in other countries. But having a pretest, having a bit of a baseline where these individuals were positioned before the crisis, well, at least that is, I think that's quite important and really good to have some grip on some processes. So the 3 new waves. We had resources available to go into the field 3 times since the start of the pandemic. So the first time was in May 2020, and this was actually the basis of quite some data crunching that we did since then. I need to admit that we, due to teaching and other obligations, have been less involved in exploring wave 3 and wave 4. But wave 3 took place in October 2020, and I put a graph on the right as well, so you can see somewhere like, okay, what's the position of the fieldwork? What's the timing of the fieldwork in relation to the number of hospitalized people? I mean, there's quite some controversy, like what's the best way of displaying the urgency of the pandemic? Should we look at infections? Should we look at hospitalizations? And I think that these hospitalization rates are somewhat a bit more elusive than just the infection rates. But so you can see we had wave 2, wave 3, and it's a bit covered over here by all your Zoom faces. We also have wave 4. There we are. Actually, when the numbers were slowly going down in May 21, last month, the numbers were actually falling quite rapidly, and society was opening up again, even to such an extent they're considering banning, or not banning, but abolishing the mask mandate maybe next week. Who knows? We'll see what it gives. Anyway, as I already said, there might be some attrition from the active population, or there was actually some attrition from the active population between 2017 and 2020. And also, we could not field the whole questionnaire again, because already in 2017, we did not offer all respondents at once the full questionnaire because it's just too long. It's like 50 to 60 minutes. So we had quite some discussions internally, like which kind of questions do we actually want to see being part of this reduced questionnaire, based on what we do know from previous crises. So we wanted to look at, yes, of course, post-materialism and trust in institutions, but at the same time also some information about solidarity, so government intervention. There are some really interesting questions in 2017 about state surveillance and state intervention, so we also explored this. in times of crisis, there is also the idea that people, they show more love for the in-group, but more hate for the out-group. So we also added some questions about prejudice towards immigrants. And if we cannot explain some phenomena like a pandemic like this, it might be possible that we rely on religion to give some answers for things that we cannot foresee. So we also added an item on religiosity. So we thought, well, about what items we should include, what items should be skipped. And we added a few new items as well about the experience of COVID-19. So how concerned people were about the virus, to what extent people follow the news through it and have more information about the virus. So we added a few questions about, and also if they, the work experience. So if they needed to work more from home, to capture a bit like the experience of COVID-19. It's not an exhaustive list. We needed to balance well, also in terms of the cost of the survey. You know that it's always like a balance between the substance and also trying to manage it with costs and keeping people actually interested in the survey as well. Also interesting, I think, for wave 3 and wave 4 is that again we did the whole exercise again, like which items should stay in, which should be kicked out, and what new should we actually capture, because the pandemic is like a dynamic thing, but in October, September onwards, you already had debates about, well, vaccination. There are vaccines coming, and then the question is, well, who should get priority? Who should be vaccinated first? And so we did some experiments on that. We added some items about emotions, which I will be talking about as well. And now in wave 4, we also added like some open questions. To what extent people think that there are some societal tensions taking place. And this will also be like analyzed after the summer when we charge our batteries and did other things. Because the data is really rich. There's all this information in there, and also this more qualitative information about how people experienced the crisis, tensions between groups, and so forth. Well, it's really good, I think, to explore these kind of questions. I was asked to give a keynote, and what keynotes do is summarize some research. So I think I included like 5 studies. I think I could have included more because there were some additional papers that are being written, some master thesis or research master thesis on this topic. So it's really rich data, and I'm not going to repeat myself. But anyway, so the first paper, it's one that got published last year in European Societies. And this is basically like the core idea of the whole project. To what extent do people actually change or have different kind of opinions during the pandemic compared to 2017? And of course, it's not that we run some analysis and to see, okay, yes, this is what it is. But no, we rely also on some theories in the past, like how can we actually envision like stability of values and volatility of opinion. There have been quite some theoretical and empirical reflections on this topic as well, dating back from the 1960s, when people divided opinions, values into like a continuum, where according to the theory and also empirical findings back then, like what remains more stable over the lifespan are the core values, values that have been socialized at young age by parents and young experiences. And due to personality formation, they remain actually quite, or they're supposed to remain quite stable over the lifespan. And often what's being looked at, or what's being one of these core values, is like religiosity, party identification, these things that have a really strong impression on our identity, because it strongly defines who we are. And these core values are also shown to remain quite stable over the lifespan. On the other part of the other end of the continuum, you have the hard political issues. These issues where people have like really difficult or have it difficult to form an opinion about, because the issue might be so novel it does not have a really strongly reflective orientation towards this. With easy political issues like gender equality, these often flow from religious orientations or from left-right party identification. So we often align these easy political issues on from these core values. But there are hard political issues that where information from several angles is being confronted to us, like surveillance, mass surveillance, for instance. We have now these debates about, well, freedom of opening up, but at the same time, we have the health concerns that are also some of the issues, like, okay, we need to really monitor, we need to contact trace everyone to get us out of the crisis. But at the same time, it might actually be confrontation with our core values, what we think about democracy, about liberties and freedoms. So that this tension that is offered by the pandemic, makes us actually think and calculate, like, okay, what's actually my opinion, knowing that you have all the trade-offs between different perspectives, and this is basically the continuum between core values and hard political issues. That also was the outline of this empirical study that was published last year in European Societies. And what we did is not rocket science. So we just looked at the within change. Within change between 2017 and 2020, where we looked at the concordance of positions by the candles tau B, as well as the t-value, to also see a bit of how did the values change over the two waves. And what we basically diagnosed is that overall the items here are also the items that are part of the panel. So all the 2017, 2020 items compared, and they're ordered based on stability. You do, for instance, see that praying or item for religiosity, as well as political left-right scale, as well as social trust, are quite concordant. They're quite. There is, of course, some change. Of course, it's really hard to have like a one-on-one opinion between 2017 and 2020. So there were some people that changed opinion, but overall, these have been the most stable items between 2017 and 2020. On the other hand, you have some items like wanting to have like a strong leader, state intervention, experts, not government. So what does it mean? Strong leader is this item in the EVS that asks, well, to what extent do you want a strong leader who takes decisions, who does not need to account for at Parliament? This actually changed heavily. Also state intervention, to the extent that people want intervention from government. And also a similar kind of item as strong leader. So the involvement of experts in political decision-making also changed quite a lot between 2017 and 2020. But these are actually, also, if you think about it, I mean, we expected them to be a bit more stable than it is now. But at the same time, because, for instance, strong leader, wanting to have a strong leader or wanting more expert involvement, well, these are actually items that reflect democratic orientations or autocratic orientations. And according to theory, they're supposed, post-materialization theory, they're supposed to be, well, quite heavily ingrained in our core values, how we position ourselves towards democracy, how we are oriented towards the state. But these items actually changed heavily between 2017 and 2020. And if you think about it, of course, it does make sense because, well, it is this reflex that we are in a crisis, and we actually ask from government, strong leaders, from experts to lead us out of this crisis. So these items changed, not according to what we expected, based on this whole dimensionality of values versus public opinion. But in the end, it did make sense that they somewhat changed. On the other hand, like most of the distinction between core values and hard political issues, it's also reflected in this kind of rank order. So mostly this rank order of what is basically stable, what's basically volatile. To a large extent, it confirmed our expectations, but the things that deviated from these expectations were there also quite logically to be explained. We also explored wave 3. So to what extent do we actually see that these items also changed to wave 3? And basically, what we do see is that again, this rank ordering is also somewhat confirmed over here. So again, the items that are supposed to remain quite stable also are quite stable between wave 2 and wave 3, while some of these more volatile issues, well, they shifted somewhat. But again, these strong leader having experts make decisions. These are like the items that typically reflect like crisis responses, and they changed heavily. So yeah, conclusion. Yeah, it's a meme that I made yesterday. So sorry for this. COVID-19 did not shook public opinion. Changed my mind, but yeah, of course it did have an effect. So we are confronted with the crisis, and people, it's not that they are immune in terms of values change or public opinion, but mostly the change responds to what we can expect from a crisis like this. But yeah, overall, and this is also something that we see in more detailed studies, like studying gender equality over time, or support for equality. There's less change than what you want to have this massive social change that some of these futurists basically predicted. But yeah, I mean, this was like a first study, and then the question is, okay, what's actually going on? Because this is like just a crude look at data, but what are some of the mechanisms? So for a different paper that got rejected continuously, but we yeah, whatever, that we got rejected continuously, but in the end we picked up for a book chapter here published at Tilburg University. Was having zooming a bit more in on this idea of political trust, because that's something that political scientists and also social scientists in general talk a lot about these days. To what extent is government benefiting from more support during the crisis? Evidently, not everyone benefited. Again, I'm not going to name Donald Trump again. It's my second time, but I hope I can leave it. I hope I can leave it to that. But initially, and I think already in March or in April, so at the beginning of the pandemic, there was already this article from a Canadian panel study that actually demonstrated that Justin Trudeau was receiving a lot of support during the pandemic, and then also in some other countries, Macron and Merkel, and also in the Netherlands. For instance, the SCP report, so the Netherlands Institute for Social Research, they also diagnosed based on their surveys that people give more support to government, and and other institutions as well. So you saw again this whole theoretical notions of the rally around the flag effect. Dropping by the people in times of crisis, they rally around the incumbent politicians because they probably, hopefully, know a way out of the crisis. And some of these studies, like the Canadian study, that was panel data, so that's of course mostly preferred. The SCP, so the Netherlands Institute for Social Research, that was repeated cross sections. So also here we thought we would have an advantage. We had an advantage of these data because we have some panel data. We do know indeed that political trust, if you are a bit involved in these debates, they're quite volatile. So if you ask people if they trust government, it might change from one week to the other. but still, it would be really good to see some systematic patterns in this data, to what extent they, for instance, can be explained by opinions or experiences towards the pandemic. So we looked as dependent variable change course in some of the political support items, not only trust in institutions or trust in government, but also this having strong leader. We look at that, for instance, as well, or wanting expert involvement. We look at that too. Yeah, we look at specific support and diffuse support. As specific support is, it's this Estonian, not Estonian, but Estonian distinction between specific support in institutions, the direct confrontation with these institutions. And then you have like the more diffuse support, the diffuse orientations towards democracy and not specific institutions, how institutions function, but more like the diffuse orientations towards democracy and how the state system should be oriented, should be organized. So we have this preference for strong leader, expert involvement, but you also look at post-materialism at the Engelhardt scale, where if you take the giving people more say in important government decisions and protecting freedom of speech, these are the post-material options, and the two others, they are the material options with some mix in between. And yeah, we have some time invariant explanations of generation, education, and gender. And we have particular for the May 2020, because again, it's May 2020 data. We have the COVID-19 items where measure that capture the salience, how salient people find the crisis. So how concerned people are about the crisis, to what extent it affects their daily life, and if they follow news on Corona. And also an item about workplace change, so to what extent people needed to work differently during the crisis. Yeah, again, this is basically nothing new. This is also like some bar charts, which also somewhat came back already in the European Societies paper. It is indeed the case that over time, people give more support, are more supportive for strong leadership between 2017, 2020. Yes, more involvement of experts. They give more trust in partisan institutions, and they have more trust in societal institutions. And this is like healthcare and I think education. So in these societal institutions, you also see that people give more support towards them. And people, that's the middle part of the presentation or the middle part of the figure, is that between 2017, 2020, people became more materialist. So they do think that, it's less important to give people more freedom of speech or these kind of things. So people ticked more other options than the post-material ones. So, and this is something that you not always hear in these debates. And this is actually why I was somewhat pissed off when we did not get this paper accepted, because I mean, you always hear about political trust, but this is actually this authoritarian reflex that we do give more trust in institutions in government, but at the same time, we were also okay, apparently, with having experts involved, while some political decisions, this is what politics is all about, taking difficult decisions. And people say, well, yeah, we should have more experts involved. Parliamentary debates might be important, but we want to have strong leadership, not necessarily accounts for parliaments. I mean, it's not that it's overwhelmingly that all people actually select this, but still you do see that there is an increase in these authoritarian notions that should also be a bit more alarming for people that, or also for political scientists that only focus on these traditional trust in government, trust in political parties. Yeah, no, also look at the more authoritarian items that are, for instance, part of this study. But then the question, to what extent, do some correlates basically explain the shift? And then it was the big non-significant, and then that's a bit discouraging, because I mean, ideally you think that even like the salience of the crisis, would people change their opinion? And this is what reviewers basically hammered about. Well, the fact that you don't find the salience of COVID effect probably implies that that there's something going on wrong with the data. But for me, it was basically, and for us, it was the interpretation, well, maybe just like a period effect. So that basically all somewhat shifted opinion towards a more rally effect. So giving more trust in politics and institutions, becoming somewhat more authoritarian. I mean, the fact that that some of the traditional explanations do not work, well, might like if you're reviewer number 2, it might imply that that the data is bogus. But if you're the Tilburg team, then you might interpret it as, well, maybe it's just a period effect, which my interpretation was also, well, it might flatten out in the end, that trust in government will originally fall back to its original position. So conclusion: blind support everywhere. But don't look only at these traditional trust in government items, but also the authoritarian notions. And I'm looking at the time as well. To us, it's like it's the interpretation of a period effect. But again, I really wanted to hint on some of the mechanisms. So what does this rally effect actually mean? What's actually going on behind this? And sorry, Michael, I'm going to be a bit repetitive now, but now it's part for study 3. I'm making this joke to Michael because last week it was the Dag van de Sociologie, so the annual meeting of the Dutch and Flemish sociology associations, and Michael and Francesco already heard this presentation, or this part of the presentation. So you can sleep now, and I can wake you up in like five minutes. But again, this idea of the rally effect often also entails a bit like an emotional response to the things that are happening. So we give more support for the incumbent parties to lead the way out of the crisis because, well, we are anxious. We can explain it, and government parties, well, they know the way out. So we're looking at what of these emotional responses underlie this support for incumbent parties, but also why do some parties actually benefit from it? And it's a bit unclear, but I don't know to what extent you can see this, but it's a tweet of Thierry Baudet, and you can see Thierry Baudet. He's the chairman of the Forum for Democratie, so the populist party. And during the crisis, he was actually one of the, even Geert Wilders did not do it so much, but he was like one of these politicians that propagated the alternative way. Let's call it like that. Like, hey, we should reopen society whatsoever. The economic toll of the crisis is excessive, so stop this mask mandate and those kind of things. So it was quite a populist move. It was not that necessarily that successful because the party also split amidst the pandemic to I think it was 21. Forum for Democratie, so also like the vote split it, and so the question is, okay, what's actually the link between these emotional responses to the crisis and populist party preferences? There is some theory for that, and this is actually something that I should skip because it's as I said, it's on previous slide. It's with Katarina Litkina. She's a PhD student at JIGC in Bremen, and she knows all these theoretical mechanisms. And I'm not even going to try to make a theoretical story out of it. I tried that last week. Didn't feel comfortable at all. So just to know, it's on the slide. There is some theoretical backbone for this, but let's just move to what the data actually tells us. So if you look at what kind of emotions did people display when you ask them the question, like what emotion you experience when you think of the coronavirus? Then most of the respondents, most of the Dutch respondents, they say, well, it's fear. Second place, it's sadness. Third place, it's no emotion. Whatever. Other emotions also quite popular, and hope. disgust and anger are less preferred emotions. But it's important to underscore that according to the theory, I have not reviewed in detail or explained in detail, but according to the literature, anger and disgust are emotions that are often linked to populist voting behavior. So if you're really angry, you want it triggers social change. It wants to you want to challenge the incumbent political system. You want to change what's going on. So anger and also disgust are emotions that are linked to social change, to voting for populist parties, or the tendency to vote for populist parties. So that's something that we could work with. Huh? So we have some questions in the wave 3 survey. Again, wave 3. So sometimes I'm shifting between wave 2 and wave 3 and whatever. But we ask people, well, to what extent did you think that current measures are fair? Do you adhere to the guidelines advised by the government? Well, if you have fear, if you have hope, then you're probably going to follow these rules. If you're angry or disgusted, then well, you're going to non-obey based on the theory. You're not going to obey with these measures. We also look at populism. Again, it's based on proxies. You have the whole scales about measuring populism by I think Agnes Ackerman in 2016. But where we look at the extent that people distrust political elites, distrust experts, where also confidence in science is part of, because that was questioned in wave 3, and having a strong leader who does not have to worry about the parliament. And then the fourth indicator is the preference for right-wing populist party, where we combine PVV, so the Geert Wilders party voting, and Forum voor Democratie voting. Honestly, you can say, well, why do you group them together? Because at PVV, Geert Wilders, he was more soft stance towards the crisis, so more following government, while the Forum voor Democratie was really about opening up society and abolishing all these guidelines. So there might be a difference between them. Again, it's small n. I mean, it's not that, the Dutch political landscape is quite fragmented. So we grouped them together, but we also did some robustness checks to see to what extent are these findings basically the same. So what do we see? We also look at self-efficacy, but that's another story. But we do see that people who have fear, they're less likely to find the measures unfair. So they're more likely to think that the measures are fair. People who have fear, they follow the rules, they trust the elite, they trust experts, and they're less likely to vote populist. So they're more likely to vote for a traditional party. Sadness has a similar kind of effects on most of the items. But we were mostly interested about was about anger and disgust, but mostly about anger. And yeah, we do see that people who are angry when they think about the coronavirus, they say, well, it makes them angry. It elicits the emotion of anger. These people find the measures unfair. There's no effect on non-compliance, so it seems that they do not differ significantly from people who have no emotions, which is actually also interesting. They do distrust elite experts, and they're also more likely to vote for populists. And so basically this somewhat confirms the theoretical orientations. But it's, here we go. So at the same time, it's also a bit like, well, is it actually a corona effect, or is it just like a general effect? Because again, the whole idea that anger is related to populist voting and behaving like a populist by not following the rules and doing your own thing and so forth. Well, this is nothing that is completely novel during the coronavirus crisis. It's also something that before the virus was here took place, that people who are angry, they have this populist tendency. So again, we wanted to check for mechanisms, but at the same time, it seems that we again rely on the same kind of mechanisms. So also here, yes, interesting insights, but at the same time, nothing that novel. So the question is, well, to what extent do we, I said swallowing, do we just all swallow these rules that government imposes upon us? And it's time for study 4. After this, I still have one study to go, but it's a study that Angelica is currently working on. And because these vignette experiments, they're so interesting these days to look at some of the underlying causal mechanisms. We also wanted to see, well, if you propose like vignette experiment, if you describe a passport or so in a certain kind of way, like, hey, this passport, it will show your full name and your date of birth, or it will show only your initials and your date of or year of birth, or it will show your full social security number. And in Netherlands, it's the BSN number. And the BSN number is like the holy grail, so to speak, because, well, it basically identifies you. Yeah, I don't think there is another Tim Reeskens, born in 1982 in the Netherlands, on this planet. But the BSN, I mean, it might be possible that if you're called Jan Janssen, I don't know what's, there might be like more than one Jan Janssen, so you're a bit, not so unique. But your BSN number is quite unique. So you give like a lot of information, you display a lot of information. And this is like one example of things that we actually randomized and offered to respondents in describing like a vignette, like describing like a passport. Also, like, is there a difference when it's offered on paper or when it's digital? Is there different support if you pass the data to governments only, or also to your own insurance company? And then we also, or Angelica, framed in such a way that what's the purpose of the passport? Is it to prevent the virus to spread, or is it just to open up society? Basically, that kind of distinction. And what you see in this presentation is basically not so much difference, right? I mean, you do see, first of all, the number 5 is quite highly selected. It means that people are quite willing to use the coronavirus passport. So 4 and 5 combined, it's a lot of respondents that say, well, yeah, I'm willing to use the passport. But so that's good news. We swallow it. We swallow this measure of either showing the QR codes or because we're vaccinated or because our brain is tickled with this PCR test. But in the end, there's not so much differentiation between all what we found were quite relevant distinctions in how the passport is designed. Particularly like, okay, is it your initials and your date of birth or the BSN number? The BSN number is doing somewhat. There's some slightly less support for that, but still, it's not that there's like an overwhelming discrimination based on descriptions of the passport in such a vignette experiment. It doesn't mean that there's no discrimination whatsoever. Other traits or other ideas that people have do not influence people's willingness to use the coronavirus passport. Here, for instance, you see if people trust government a lot, they're also more likely to use to indicate that they will use the passport. So that also means that still the implementation of this passport also relies heavily on the extent that people trust government. Do I still have time for study 5 or okay, study 5? Also, if you will have the vaccine or so, people who have had the vaccine, they're also more likely to use the passport. People who are concerned about the coronavirus also. Thanks again, Angelica, for the really nice graphs. As you compared them with my graphs earlier, you can see who the really smart people in the room are. Thank you, Angelica. The last one, again, this whole idea of vaccination. As I said, having this panel, it's really nice to run some experiments because everything is done online. and you can randomize everything, and you can offer people different options. And yeah, the last study that I wanted to show is what we did in terms of vaccination priorities. Not only vaccination, but also the intensive care. There was yeah, we did like 2 experiments in the list panel, wave 3, so in October. Again, the previous one was the recent one in May, so it's quite novel data. But this one is actually from October last year. So we described randomly like 2 people. So we offered respondents from the list panel like 2 options, person A and person B. And you do see like the characteristics, that the attributes that were randomly assigned to respondents. So the age differed from 27 to 77, the weight that differed from a healthy BMI to an unhealthy BMI. Yeah, I want to make a joke about the coronavirus kilos and those kind of things, but I'd rather not to. Yeah, compliance with the coronavirus measures. We wanted to have that in. I mean, there's also like a theoretical reason why we actually wanted to look at these kind of attributes, like compliance with coronavirus measures. If you fall back to the deservingness literature, everyone might be a bit familiar with these debates as well. It's like having control over your own social risk. If you travel, if you go to Barcelona, if you travel, even if there's like a negative travel advice, well, then you expose yourself to the risk. And people might think, well, yeah, people who do not follow the rules, why should they actually be given priority for vaccine? So for all these kind of attributes, there is like a theoretical basis for that. Yeah, so we asked, and also like the crucial job, where the idea is, well, yeah, people probably give more priority to a nurse because they work in healthcare, and of course to teachers, right? Not, yeah. Anyway, so we asked people. So we confronted them with person A and person B with randomly assigned attributes. So it can be that person A and person B were similar on 3 attributes and differed only on 1. It can be that all the attributes were different between person A and person B. But we asked them, well, who would you give priority access to vaccine, because there is shortage, there will be shortage for vaccination. So who will you give priority access on vaccination? And yeah, this is the finding again. This is not my graph, because yeah, I'm not so good in graphs. Yeah, you should see, you should hear these people that are actually zooming in. People are making fun of me, but anyway. So what you see is that that the active population, so people 52, I mean, that age in the first place does not do so much. Well, all the debates and also like the organization of the vaccination strategy has always been about, yeah, the elderly first and the most vulnerable risk groups first. While in fact, we do notice that in public opinion, this was actually less relevant. The active population, the 52 years old, they have been given slightly more priority. But yeah, it's not the case that the elderly were like yeah, favored more than younger people. If you are overweight, then you've been given slightly less priority. So we wanted to exclude medical conditions. We wanted to exclude medical conditions from the experiment, but we still do see that that BMI seems to be like a characteristic that people penalize in the vaccination priority. Yeah, the strongest criterion was obeying the measures. If you did not follow the rules by traveling and so forth, then people also say, well, yeah, this person should not have priority on vaccination. So they prefer to give the vaccine to someone who was quite obedient to the measures, who did not travel to Barcelona. By the way, this traveling is not that because I like to travel and it's coming from my own personal experience, but just because we did not have a mask mandate by then. I mean, ideally, following the rules would be like, okay, you wear your mask, but back then in October, there was not a nationwide mask mandate in the Netherlands. And last but not least, yeah, it seems that nurses and teachers, in public opinion, not by government, at least not for the teachers, but at least that public opinion favors them a bit more. than if you're an administrative assistant. And also quite shocking that if you're unemployed, that people are actually put at the end of the queue. Okay, I need some beer. Final conclusion, because I did not run out of insights, because as I explained already from the beginning, is that there are quite some students also working on the data. With Kita, there's like a paper published in the Dutch journal, and with Leen van der Kasteel and Katja and Inge, we are also working on gender equality, preference for gender equality. So there's so much more insights that are actually flowing from this data. But yeah, what we basically see is that public opinion has been quite predictable. Yes, we do see some changes here and there, but basically it's what we could have predicted based on theoretical assumptions and how the crisis is somewhat unfolding. But the changes are also rather meager, and that's particularly interesting if you look at some of the more detailed studies. For instance, about preference for equality that Julia is now writing in her thesis, and that Ruud needs to grade in a few weeks' time. Is that the shift? Yeah, it's a bit disappointing, even though that, and then maybe it's possible because yeah, we live in a great country where government works well, where you have like a lot of protection measures from social security and so forth that prevent massive changes taking place. But yeah, so it's not the major shift in public opinion that would drive social change, so to speak. Yes, you do find some confirmation for some main mechanisms like this rally around the flag effect. So we see somewhat more solidarity. We see less prejudice, which is also interesting, and that's a different debate. But it might be because the whole refugee crisis was moved to the back, that COVID became salient, that people do not care about migration so much, and suddenly there's a drop in prejudice. So there is a lot of insights coming from these data, while at the same time the mechanisms are not always that clear at this point. So that means that we need to have more research in the future, both longitudinal, comparative, and maybe some qualitative studies as well about the experience of the crisis. But at the same time, our findings also show that people are quite, the findings that we find, yeah, that's of course really good English. The findings that we find, they might actually confirm why people have been so obedient to the measures. So will the COVID pandemic at the end of the day be a wrinkle in the course of history? Yeah, who knows? Who knows? But at the same time, yeah, sometimes I really think, well, okay, this is what it is, and it's not so main overwhelming findings. So it's time to move on to research that really matters. And I think that, as what Wim also said earlier about the whole interdisciplinary research and the main topics that are being discussed here at the conference in the next 2 days. Well, yeah, a lot of kudos, a lot of support for the presentations and for receiving good feedback. And yeah, I'm opening the floor, I think, for questions. And thank you very much.
Thanks, Tim, for this real keynote, 5 studies. It also shows a lot of work has been done, is being done in Tilburg at the moment and at other places. I just put a message in the chat, so if there are any questions, please go to the chat and say that you want to ask a question, then we can give you the floor. So the floor is open. Okay, Michiel. Michiel, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim, for your very nice presentation. I will come.
Hi. You're there? Yeah, I'm here. Good to know. Well, as I said, thank you, Tim. I think it was a very nice keynote. And you end with the question actually that you were asking yourself whether the COVID would have a long-lasting impact on us. And as I recall correctly, Wim van der Donk said like, okay, maybe the impact of the COVID will be that digital communication will be more important and stuff. So I was wondering whether that is also in your data. Can you actually have some insights on that, that indeed workplace changes, the importance of working at home, the importance of such Zoom calls as this as well, digital communication will actually increase due to the COVID pandemic. Is that also found in this in the EVS data?
No. Yeah, no, we have we have some of these data about workplace change. People need to work more from home, but in fact it does not have such a strong effect on this public opinion. And so also like what are the long-term changes? Of course, I mean before the presentation, Wim van der Donk said, well, yeah, people sometimes tend to overestimate the short-term consequence of such a crisis, but underestimate the long-term consequence of the crisis. I think, well, yeah, this might also be what we've been seeing here. And people expect initially that many things will change, also public opinion maybe during the crisis. While in fact it has been quite, things change, but less dramatic than what some people expected. But maybe in the long run, maybe these hard political issues like about surveillance. Maybe it takes like years for such debates to unfold and that people actually form an opinion about it. But maybe because of a crisis like this, it might have actually dramatically increased the speed of how people form an opinion about that. But also there will be some changes, but maybe more in the behavioral perspective, like how workplaces will be organized. I've always been quite skeptical about the fact that people won't shake hands anymore after the crisis. I think that's so ingrained in our habits and showing respect that I don't see it happen. What you saw with Joe Biden at the European summit, that they were like bumping elbows the whole time. I think that with Putin it was already like a hand. So I think that also in the future it will be again shaking hands again, because it's so ingrained in our culture. But who knows? I might be wrong, but that's also like incremental insights, I think, and that's science.
Tim, I really liked your presentation. It was really, for me, the first and very good insight into what you all have been doing. And maybe I'm asking too much here, but I would really be intrigued whether or not you were able to assess some effects or of the vastly increased dependence on media and technology of people. Because I have the idea that I'm looking at myself, I'm looking at how I have been working the last year, that I was much more dependent, we all were much more dependent on media, the information, but also on technology. And for example, for the explanation of some of the emotions, but also a shift in opinions, I think this should be investigated. But I don't know if you already have information on this.
Yeah, I think this is also something that we should discuss with people from the LIS panel, because I sometimes you're so focused on this particular questionnaire, while the LIS panel also has some other items of people, and they're a panel, and maybe in 1 month they received this COVID questionnaire from us, while the month before they received a questionnaire about media use. And the question about media use, how often they tune in and so forth, that's not particularly part of our study. But it's not always that easy to negotiate with this panel to have access on the full range of information. But the questions that you ask is they're relevant, they're important. But based on the data that we have, we cannot fully respond to this. We have this question about to what extent people follow the coronavirus over the news and media. But we group this in this salience of the COVID-19 pandemic variable. But again, that's not the one that's doing too much in these political support items. Maybe it's something to tease out for these emotions if there's some more discrimination. Again, there's so much data and there's so little time, and that's something for the future for sure, and for other people. I think the first 2 waves are already available online, so people can do some crunching. Yeah.
Okay. So there's a question by Paul Decker. Paul, can you come in?
Sure. Thank you very much, Tim. It was really interesting. What surprised me, and we talked about it before, I think, is the rise of support for strong leaders. Because you see the rise of political trust. And what we normally see in our surveys is that there's a kind of negative relationship. If people like the present government, they don't like strong leaders, and when they are dissatisfied, they prefer strong leaders. So I'm surprised with it. And did you have a look at the individual changes? Because you have this great panel data, so you could have a look at, is there really a group that is rising in political support and rising in support for strong leaders?
It's a good question. I think it's I'm familiar with the COB report, where actually it shows that there's negative correlation between both items, between both the traditional political trust and this support for strong leaders, which is actually somewhat against our findings, because we actually do see that it runs in parallel. But we did not look at at correlations, and basically this is maybe bad to admit, but we didn't look at combinations between or at correlations between the variables. So yes, we run correlations or Kendall's B over the 2 waves, but we didn't look at correlations between the variables per individual, and this is actually something that that should respond to your question. Correlational analysis between the variables should inform to what extent people who have more trust who have seen an increase in trust in government also see an increase in these authoritarian notions. So if it runs in parallel, or if there's a negative correlation, that's something to look out to do. I think I'll also put it on my list. And then also, maybe do some latent class analysis, because that's also something that you hint on. If there are like really combinations of people that have an increase in trust in government, but at the same time authoritarian increases, while some people actually increases in trust but decreases in all these authoritarian notions. So more research is needed in that respect to fully respond to your question. That's a bit disappointing, right? I mean, the questions that you have, it's just like, have not looked into it, or it's not in the data, and it just opens up like I think also like research opportunities for the future, and it's important. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next question is Katja Ivanova.
Yes, thank you, and thank you, Tim, for the talk. A lot of studies. Findings which are a little bit all over the place sometimes, not always significant, not very robust. So I'm wondering, you departed your whole talk from studies that have been done with previous crises, which were very specific crises. So there was an economic crisis, a very clear break, very clear collapse of the global economy in many ways. Terrorist attacks, very clear events. I'm wondering whether the problem with the COVID-19 crisis is that it's just so all-encompassing. So it hit economically, it hit socially, it hit politically. So there are all of these different elements, and it's just, I wonder whether we're not expecting too much, given how just all-encompassing the crisis has been. So we just don't know what it does. We really cannot understand how it shifted really people's experiences.
Yeah. Also, Ruud gives me the advice now that I should look over there because there's a camera, and I should look at the monitor to look at you, Katja. So I'm looking at you, Katja. I'm not looking at you, Katja. But yeah, I think it's that's actually why I think we should have these comparative studies as well. More there's this project Values in Crisis, which is being coordinated by Vienna, University of Vienna. Where they also like administered like similar kind of surveys in like 17 countries to see to what extent are like different values expressions in some of these countries, and can they be related to to government measures or to the death rate or infection rate, economic impact. Maybe that's something that at the initial phase of the crisis was like economic impact was cushioned to a large extent because of government intervention. But maybe in the near future, when some of these measures end because the economy is opening again, well, it might be that some countries will be more affected than others. And what will actually that be on the consequence for public opinion? So, but yeah, your initial idea, well, yeah, maybe things are just so moving so fast that people cannot make sense of it. So they just continue with their habits. Yeah, it's something to think about, but at the same time, we have these items about to what extent are you concerned about the coronavirus crisis, and to what extent does it actually affect your daily life, and for things that mattered, like changes in political support, it did not have an impact. So we're still trying to understand like what's actually then going on, but maybe because everything is just too massive, maybe we indeed should go beyond our numbers and should talk with people about how they have experienced all this. But yeah, there simply are limitations of what we can do with data as well, and I think that's also something that we should not forget. Any more questions, Katja?
No, I'll leave it to somebody else.
Yeah, Erwin has a question, and he has a question that can be answered. So.
Hey, well, I should look there. Thank you, Tim, for the great presentation. It's a bit strange that the camera is in that corner anyway. You started your talk with some insights from Yuval Noah Harari that said, on the one hand, there's a political threat, or two threats, some people would say, that there is a risk of increasing government surveillance, and there is also a risk of nationalist isolation. And my question is, so this is more like a political tendency, right? So my question is, how does these tendencies, these threats that Harari identifies, how do they relate to the political opinions or the shifts in political opinions that you find? So it's speculation, so there's always an answer, I would say. And it's,
hi. Yeah, this nationalist versus the global. If I'm correct, we did not find like the people. Yeah, we did not find that people became more prejudiced, and so that there was some more. We found that people became more trusting in their own group, but that was not at the expense of distrust in foreigners, for instance, of opposing immigration. And so if you have this idea of, okay, there's a trade-off between in-group love and out-group love or out-group hate, we do not see that in the data. It's not the case that people suddenly, at least in the Netherlands, have turned their back towards immigrants. Yes, there have been increases in like anti-Asian prejudice and so, because there's a connection still being made with Wuhan, but it's not the case that at a more abstract level that people became more opposed to immigration. So in that respect, we do not see that there is a turn towards more nationalist sentiments, but also not global. I think we cannot get that from the data, but I also don't think that people became also more like cosmopolitan oriented or so. I think that in that respect, this kind of dilemma is just like unsolved. And also this idea about government surveillance or yeah, people's empowerment, or how he calls it. Yeah, apparently people seem to be okay with the fact that government traces them and that we work with this QR code or the vaccination passport because it seems to be a way out of the crisis. The question is, well, if things flatten out, to what extent will some of these proposals, will there be a bit more questions in Parliament by public opinion if they do not actually yeah, are getting abolished at some point? I don't know. I don't know. I mean, in the end, it's not the case that people became more skeptical of state surveillance and so forth. But yeah, it was also like my original idea that some of these proposals they seem to conflict with how the Dutch actually yeah, value freedom and are skeptical of yeah, too much of this surveillance in our private life. But in fact, for the moment being, it seems to be that they swallow it. They swallow these measures. But yeah, in the long run, sorry, in the long run, yeah, that's also, I should look at Ellen, not at the camera. In the long run, it's yeah, we need more data. It's always a good answer, right? Or we need to have more other strategies like big data analysis, where you can also see what kind of debates unfold at various places.
Okay, it's almost time. If anybody has another question, please do so now. Apparently not. It's 11 o'clock, so we are going for the break now, and hope to see you back in 15 minutes, and then we will split up into groups in the breaking rooms. Thank you very much, and see you soon.